Hello and welcome. You're on Strat News Global. I'm Nitin Gokhale. Strategic Insight is a program that we do in association with the United Service Institution, India's oldest military think tank. And in today's episode, we are going to talk about a rarely spoken factor in the India-Pakistan-China interaction or strategic interplay, and that is the nuclear factor. So what is it that is common between India, China and Pakistan? Very little you would think in terms of culture or the system of governance or the way the militaries function. But there is one factor that is common between these three countries is that all of them are nuclear powers. And that factor is something that we are going to discuss in today's episode of Strategic Insight. Joining me today are two distinguished ladies, experts in their own field. To my left, Dr. Manpreet Sethi. She is the Distinguished Fellow at the Center for Air Power Studies, another military think tank of the Indian Air Force. And Dr. Roshan Khanijo, who is the Assistant Director Research, as well as a nuclear specialist who has written books on nuclear issues concerning India, China, Pakistan. Welcome both of you, and I'm glad that I have both the panelists as ladies, because that's a complaint that a lot of people have, and it's something that we are honored about, we feel honored about on Strat News Global. Let me start with you, Dr. Sethi. The factor about the nuclear factor between these three countries is something that is rarely spoken or discussed, as I mentioned in my introduction. But should there be a collusive collaboration, let me say, between India and between China and Pakistan, what is it that India should be prepared for? Because I will talk about the doctrines later, but is there a threat to India, a collusive threat on the nuclear front?
Well, you said that the nuclear factor is not spoken very often between the three. I would say that's true between India and China. The nuclear word doesn't get mentioned so often between India and China. We've had this, standoff for over 100 days now, and the nuclear word has not been mentioned. But between India and Pakistan, the situation is a little different, because the moment the crisis breaks out, Pakistan likes to play up the nuclear threat, and there are various reasons as to why they do that. And we all understand, the projection that they're trying to do to cow India back, or either to get the international audience to get, worried about what is happening in the region, that it's a dangerous flashpoint, etc. So they have their compulsions for doing that, and the nuclear word does get mentioned between India and Pakistan. Now, as far as the collusive threat that we are talking about, well, this has existed in the nuclear domain for quite some period of time. It's right from the 70s onwards that we have known that the two are one in terms of the help that has come from China to Pakistan. And it continued for a long period of time. China joined the NPT only in 1992, and since then overtly it has not been doing this. But even then, recently Pakistan tested a MIRV missile, one missile which can carry multiple warheads, and that has clearly come from China. So in terms of the proliferation relationship, that has always been there. In terms of the two coming together to threaten India with nuclear weapons, that looks a bit out of the picture to me, because nuclear weapons essentially are weapons of mass destruction. And irrespective of how much capability, and India has a decent amount of nuclear weapons by now, it can cause unacceptable damage to both sides. So the collusive threat on the nuclear front in terms of usage of the weapon, I don't think so. But in terms of the help that China does give to Pakistan, and sometimes the games that Pakistan plays on behalf of China, that will continue. But that doesn't pose an existential threat to India in any way.
And I think India therefore doesn't really factor that in when the tensions ratchet up between India and Pakistan, or between India and China, because they know that they are weapons of deterrence rather than use. Dr. Roshan, you've studied the nuclear issues for such a long time. The doctrines of these three countries are clearly different from each other. And India, of course, has spoken about the no first use. Pakistan has first use. China, of course, has limited no first use. So just explain to us, what does that mean, and the viewers would be benefited by that.
Thank you, Nitin, for inviting me. Before I start that, I'll just like to give you a brief about the nuclear environment post-Cold War.
Right.
You see, the nuclear environment post-Cold War is no longer spoken in terms of dyads, that is US-Russia.
Right.
It's more multipolar. And we talk about when negotiations or we discuss in terms of triads, that is US-Russia, China, or India-Pakistan, China. And the important thing which is taking place is there are two important things. Firstly, there has been lowering of nuclear thresholds. Suppose if you see US nuclear posture review, they say that they're going to deploy low yield nuclear weapons on submarines. And the Russians, they are having Poseidon underwater things.
Right.
So there is a lowering of thresholds, and there is also new niche technologies which are taking place. In that background, if we try to see, Pakistan, as we all know, their nuclear doctrine is totally India-centric.
Right.
And the policies also, they say, are to deter India's conventional strength. And that is why if you see their thresholds, the four thresholds which they say political and economy and all those things, they are totally related to that.
Correct.
But the one thing which has been constant in their doctrine is the first use.
First use.
They say it is going to be the first use.
Yes.
And another thing is the other caveat is minimum deterrence. But this has over the period changed to full spectrum deterrence.
Right.
So what do you mean by full spectrum deterrence? That means they have a nuclear weapon at each level. For example, at the tactical level, they have a Nasr,
Right.
which is a very short-range
short
missile.
range missile.
At the strategic level, they have Shaheen.
Correct.
Apart from that, they have got cruise missiles, whether it is Babar or it is Raad, which is a air-launched cruise missile.
Right.
And apart from that, they are developing their triad. So their doctrine, they are trying to see that how well it can deter India.
Right.
Now, as far as China is concerned, you very rightly pointed out, they have what we call it a conditional no first use. They also look into the minimum deterrent thing, and their second strike capability will be lethal.
Right.
But if you observe the trends recently, what they are trying to, there was recently a report which stated that they are increasing their fissile material. And now if they are going to increase their fissile material, especially plutonium, which needs to be seen whether it is going to be used tactically or strategically,
Right.
because that will give us a window about the nuclear doctrine. Secondly, they are going to have more launch on warning capabilities. All these are quite contrary to the no first use.
Doctrine.
And we have to understand that Chinese are master at disguising. And they can change the narrative anytime they want. If you see the classical example of South China Sea,
Yes.
they built the islands, they
That's
said
true.
it's for peaceful purpose, and then they made it.
Exactly.
Now, as far as India is concerned, I feel it has been now 17 years for our nuclear doctrine.
Sure.
And probably the time is there. We can review it and say we can make it little bit more ambiguous. The ambiguity would help us in maneuvering little things.
Sure.
And
I
we
think
can,
there have been some, signals
Yes.
at the highest level. The
Yes.
previous Defence Minister Manohar Parrikar
yes,
had a very
He had-
ambiguous statement. So did Rajnath Singh when he went to
Yes.
Pokhran.
Yes.
So I think some rethink, if not review.
yes, rethink has to be there. And even as you call about the no first use, if we have to first analyze our core interest, if the no first use is is okay with the core interest, then we need not change.
Right.
But if we feel that our conventional strength is not good enough, then we can add certain kind of conditions to the no first use.
Right.
But if the conventional strength is good, then we need not do it. Because what is the purpose of nuclear deterrence? The purpose of nuclear doctrine is to deter your adversary, and that can come only if you have the intent,
Right.
you have the capabilities, and most importantly, you can signal at the appropriate time your capabilities.
Right. So that's, I think, an important factor. Dr. Manpreet, signaling is extremely important. I think, when you speak about nuclear factor in any relationship, I think the adversary must know whether the country that is talking about nuclear factor has the, like she said, capability, the intent, and the political will. I guess. So, do you think, given that Pakistan always overtly, does this, does India need to get down to that level, or what India has today, the no first use policy, which is a declared nuclear doctrine, does it need review? One, and two, how much of a threat is the tactical nuclear weapons that Pakistan has developed, not now, but maybe from 2000 onwards? During Operation Parakram, they actually publicly declared that they had TNW. What is your view?
See, as far as the doctrine is concerned, it's constantly under review based on the threat perceptions that you have, the capability build-up that you see on the adversarial end. You keep the doctrine under review. But I have a slightly different take on the fact that the doctrine, in the current form in which it is giving you enough ambiguity.
Okay.
NFU gives you enough ambiguity, and
Okay.
I don't think we need to get into that game where we, fall into the same trap of making things and life more difficult for ourselves.
Right.
The NFU is giving us benefits at the diplomatic level. The NFU is giving us benefits of strategic stability
Right.
by not putting the adversary on the edge and getting him to, get so
React.
heckled and panicky that he has to use his nuclear weapons.
Sure.
After all, my doctrine of deterrence is essentially for not letting the weapons come into play.
Right.
And the best way of doing that is by assuring him that I am not using my weapon.
Yes.
You can do it when you want to.
Correct.
And the third benefit, which is least understood, I feel, is the military benefit of the NFU, where you are liberated from your requirements, which will be necessary if you had to have a credible first use,
Right.
which means a large arsenal, counterforce capability, a very good ISR capability to
Right.
be able to do a
Hit the
first
targets,
strike,
yeah, exactly.
because then you want to take out as much as you can
Yes.
from the other side.
Right.
And therefore, when I think people start equating conventional asymmetry with nuclear weapons and that gap being filled by nuclear weapons, I think we run into a problem.
Right.
Do we think when Pakistan is doing that, do we take their nuclear weapons threat as a
Seriously?
credible threat?
No, we don't.
We believe that nuclear weapons will come into play only when there is an existential threat to the state. And that's where, if India senses a conventional asymmetry of any kind with China, and I don't think in the areas in which we think war will happen, we have such a huge conventional asymmetry. But in case that is the truth, then we either have to match up conventionally, and there's a wide spectrum within the conventional field which can help. It doesn't have to be between fighting with fisticuffs or with whatever those
Like they do with the
batons that they
batons,
used,
yeah.
or going up to the nuclear level.
Right.
There is so much of a
There's
conventional
there's a lot
spectrum
of,
in between.
steps in between on the escalatory ladder.
And we need to be thinking about those rather
Right.
than beginning to think that conventional asymmetry can only be bridged by suggesting the use of nuclear weapons,
Offsetting it by nuclear,
which is not the truth
right.
and which is not credible.
Yes.
Now coming to your question about tactical nuclear weapons.
Right.
Now Pakistan has projected that, and I think it's rather lazy analysis on the part of many people when we start thinking that because of the example of NATO Warsaw Pact
Yeah.
or Pakistan India, that the way of bridging that gap is with the tactical nuclear weapons. Again, do we take Pakistan's tactical nuclear weapon seriously? Do we believe that they can use a tactical nuclear weapon and get away with it? There are some assumptions that people make when they talk about tactical nuclear weapons.
Yes.
One is that it'll somehow, it's easier to use
Right.
because it's a smaller weapon. So therefore, it'll be condoned by the world and by everyone else, including if Pakistan uses against India, somehow it'll slip under our radar of retaliation and we will not do retaliation. That's an assumption they are making, and I don't think they
think
can
it's
take it very
overstretching the
seriously.
assumption. Yeah.
Absolutely. The other assumption is that it will somehow lead to controlled nuclear war. I don't think any use of a nuclear war, and we've seen that through several simulation exercises that happened between US, USSR during the Cold War,
Right.
and which we have done at our own level,
Yes.
that any use of a nuclear weapon can be controlled. Escalation to higher levels is going to happen.
Right.
This is a weapon of mass destruction.
Correct.
So however low the yield might be to start with, what you're going to face is going to be, a much larger problem.
And no political executive can then
Take a call. There is a taboo against the use of nuclear
That's right.
weapons, which is in place. I don't think any political leader can take an easy
That's right.
decision that
on
this
yeah.
is what we are going to do.
Exactly.
So bridging that conventional asymmetry has to be done at the conventional
Right.
level. And as I pointed out to you, many options are available for us to be able to do that. So let's not jump to the nuclear level straight away.
Absolutely.
I think we are doing fine with our doctrinal pronouncements.
Right.
There could be better signaling in
Yes.
terms of capability, intent, and your signaling sense.
Yes.
But apart from that, I don't think it calls for
Any review or-
revision of the treaty.
yeah,
Review
exactly.
carries on,
Review, yeah, of
but
course,
no
review
revision
carries
is
on.
needed
No
of the
revision
treaty.
No, I think it's a fair point of view, and I think China also probably looks at it quite differently from what Pakistan does. Dr. Roshan,
Yeah.
And therefore, see, China is building its own rocket forces, it's building its own, nuclear arsenal. But what is of concern to India perhaps is what kind of technology it will transfer to Pakistan. I mean, they will always try to strengthen Pakistan's hands by giving them a technology which Pakistan does not have. In that case, what should be India's response and what should India do?
Before I answer your question, I respect Manpreet's view, but my point is the nuclear doctrine has to be credible, firstly, and it should be credible against China too. Pakistan, we don't have a problem. We know we can handle Pakistan.
Right.
But with China also, it has to be credible. That's what. And that, as I pointed out, it has to be through capabilities and intent.
And
Both is
signaling.
important.
Yeah.
And conventional weapon plays an important part.
Right.
It is an important part for that. Now, coming to the technology as what you're saying, see, the nuclear collaboration between Pakistan and China is a known fact. Right from the time when they were exploding the nuclear tests, we know that China had offered their test range. The technology as well as fissile material, both had been transferred to them.
Right.
The M11s, even the Shaheen series, they say it's similar to the DF-11. My thing is the technology is going to be transferred.
So we must assume that.
We must assume that. But before I come to that, I would like to mention one thing. What are the modernization trend which is happening in China, which has a bearing not only for us, but it will be subsequently passed on to the Pakistanis. If you see the manned weapons. Now, for the land forces, they have MIRVs, they are becoming more precise.
Right.
For their PLAF, they are developing their stealth bombers.
Sure.
They have their air-launched ballistic missiles. You see their naval wing, they have their JL-3 next generation SLBMs,
Right.
where the range is much more. But I'm more worried about the unmanned platforms.
Okay.
The niche technology, which is coming up in a big way, is the artificial intelligence and automation. Now, the Chinese, they had told in 2015 that they want to have a rapid response.
Okay.
And under that, in 2017, they had given a plan, new generation artificial intelligence plan, by which they want to become masters by 2025 and 2030. So now this artificial intelligence has been coming up in which ways? There are two basic technologies which are coming: hypersonic glide vehicles, hypersonic cruise missiles. Now here, because of the speed and maneuverability, it becomes very difficult for the radar to catch them. And there is an attack time constraint, which impacts your deterrent stability. The second one, which is more problematic, is unmanned platforms, underwater and aerial.
Right.
Which is because they can carry nuclear payloads, and they have said that they are going to develop UCAVs and UUVs. They are developing, in fact, extra large UUVs. So this is the area which needs to be seen. Now, as far as the technology transfer is concerned, Manpreet recently told you about the MIRVs.
Yes.
That has been transferred by the Chinese. Recently, in the month of February, we caught a Chinese ship which was, and we found that they were sending autoclaves, which are used in ballistic missiles and space program.
True.
So these proliferations are going on. Now, for their Air Force, they have J-17s, they can upgrade it. For their Navy, they are planning cruise missiles on ships and submarines. They are taking submarines, conventional submarines from China also. But now if the platform, their triads they are developing, they have to take Chinese help, because if you see Babar is what? It is a reverse engineered Tomahawk missile. That's what has been stated.
Yes.
So the technology is going to come to Pakistan because there is a collusivity and China has an interest, economic, military, political, all interest in Pakistan. There is CPEC, military presence and the political maneuvering of Pakistan. So now the question, what options do we have? Firstly, we need to observe China's scientific progress very keenly to see where it is going and what are the technologies which can be transferred to Pakistan. Secondly, the niche technologies. We should take a leaf from China and we should try. For example, AI is concerned. We should have more AI-related subjects in the universities. They should be focused plan by the government with the budget.
Right.
And there should be cross, joint cooperation between the military and the scientific community
Right.
to develop the platforms.
Yes. I think that's a fair point, and it's an important point to take forward the conversation. Dr. Manpreet, India has been a nuclear power, declared nuclear power for now more than 22 years, since 1998. But our nuclear program goes back a long way, some decades. What, in your view, is India's strength as far as nuclear factor in the military domain is concerned? Are we continuously adding arsenal? I mean, we don't have to give figures or anything, but are you confident about India's ability?
Certainly I am, because as I mentioned to you earlier, it's a weapon of mass destruction.
Right.
So even when you have small numbers, when China started out on its nuclear journey in 1964, when they tested, Mao had said 6 nuclear weapons
Right.
is all that China needs. And at that time, it was trying to deter both the US and the USSR.
Yes.
So because it's a weapon of that nature, I don't think numbers or we have to be worried about parity with either of our sides.
Yes.
So even if Pakistan is 10 warheads more or China is perhaps 100 warheads more than what we have, that is not a matter of concern. Delivery systems of adequate ranges
Right.
and reliability, that's where our focus needs to be.
Sure.
Our next focus needs to be on survivability of our arsenal. Since we have a no first use doctrine, it should be made credible by projecting it to the eyes of the adversary,
Right.
that irrespective of what kind of a strike you do, it's never going to be a disarming or a decapitating strike.
Right.
So your survivability of your arsenal, of your command and control structure,
Right.
of the man who's going to actually
Order
launch the vehicle, plus of course the man who's going to order the launch, that entire chain of command is redundant to an extent where that chance cannot be taken by the other side. So that's the focus of your survivability.
So the triad is important then.
Triad is extremely important. The sea-going leg of the nuclear delivery systems is important. So we've made a start, I would say, with INS Arihant.
That's right.
Because the media often starts projecting it as credible deterrence on its way, etc. I think it's a work in progress.
Right.
But the sisters of INS Arihant, as they come along with longer ranges of our submarine launched ballistic missiles, gaining somewhat more in accuracy, I think all of this will be very helpful in strengthening the deterrence.
Right.
But even at this moment in time, I don't think any of our adversaries can really take a chance and believe that they will not have retaliation coming back at them if they were to use their nuclear weapons. Another question that is often asked on this is on red lines.
Right.
That,
what
should
is the
we
threshold?
be, what is your threshold? I think with the NFU, India has such a clear red line that any use of a nuclear weapon, and we make no distinction or categories of nuclear weapons.
It's not
We
just
don't
tactical
say-
nuclear weapon
or a
strategic
strategic weapon. Any use of a nuclear weapon will breach our red line,
Right.
and there is going to be retaliation which will cause you unacceptable damage.
Right.
So to that extent, we've liberated ourselves from having to draw
Any
up these
decision
red
making
lines.
in a hurry.
Because what happens when you lay down red lines is that either you put your decision maker into a commitment trap,
Sure.
or it becomes a credibility problem for the future because you've not been able to live up with that. We
Right.
all remember President Obama, putting out that red line on Syrian use of chemical
Yes.
weapons,
And then nothing happened.
not being able to do anything about
Exactly,
it.
yeah.
So laying down red lines, we've not even done it at the conventional level against the subconventional threat
Correct.
that we feel,
That's
because you
right.
want to keep that
Ambiguity,
agility in your decision making to be able to respond the way you want to. So on the nuclear front, I would say perfect credible deterrence never exists.
Never, yes.
It's always a work in progress, and I think we are doing fine. We need to keep our focus on that, not get carried away by the cacophony that we hear around us. Roshan has recounted to us so many capabilities that China is developing, which could be handed over also to Pakistan, and I have no doubt that
It
over
will
a period
happen,
of time it will filter.
It will happen,
But do we have to respond to each one of them?
I
Not
think we are
necessarily
developing
at
our
the
own,
not
capability.
necessarily at the nuclear level.
Right.
We can do very many other things at the conventional level, which is a more usable capability.
Sure.
I think that's where we need to be, not get overly stretched on the nuclear
That
front.
race is also never ending. I mean, if you sort of match weapon to weapon and numbers, bean counting, if it happens in nuclear arsenal, then expensive proposition
Absolutely.
too.
I
So
think
therefore, I think
with our doctrine of credible minimum deterrence and no first use, we've kept ourselves from both crisis instability and arms race instability.
Right.
So we are in a happy position right now. I
Exactly.
don't think we need to upset that by getting caught into anything else.
Yeah.
But I may just add, we need to observe the niche technologies.
Of course.
Because, you know, UCAF and UUVs, they have the capability of upsetting your second strike capabilities, because they give you ISR capabilities, it increases
Right.
the one who has it. So
No,
it is,
certainly,
we
I-
need to observe where the
And
things
I-
are going on, and we have a window where we can develop our capabilities.
right.
So if we are more focused, yes, this is the platform we need to develop in
Right.
the AI. And like Chinese recently stated that the future warfare may be controlled by laws, that is lethal
Yeah.
automated weapon systems.
Yeah.
Maybe not now, another
Maybe
10 years or
10
so.
years later,
And they
yeah.
rightly said, if you don't disrupt, you will be disrupted.
Correct. No, I think fair point, and both of you made such important points. I think this is the first time probably that we have spoken in such detail on this program, and I am thankful to both of you for giving us that insight. Strategic Insight will keep coming in coming up with these kind of discussions, because we feel the citizens and the viewers need to know. It should not be limited to a select audience of strategic thinkers and analysts, and that is why this program with USI that we have launched. We will come back with more as and when the need arises. But as I keep saying, do like us on our social media platforms, keep sending us comments and feedback, and of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and visit our website as and when you need to know more about such issues. Until the next time, it's goodbye, and thank you very much,
Thank you.
ladies.
Thank you.